Hey everyone, it's Jason again, talking to OCV about how to read the Bible for all it's worth. And we're just going to go over the next part of the book, which talks about genre. And everybody's heard Pastor Charlie talk about needing to know the literary background and the context of the scriptures that we're reading. So genre is going to allow us to use that as a framework. And genre just is like a fancy name for the category or the similar form that a certain type of literary work is going to be in. So when you think about a newspaper, that has several genres in it. So you might have an editorial section, you might have a narrative section that describes something that's an objective type of event, like a sports event. You might have a classified ad, you might have a funny comic or something like that. So 1,000 years from now, historians are going to have to figure out that if you read a classified ad that says a word about someone doing the lawn and a comic that says a joke about the lawn, the word lawn or cut might be used in a different way for those two genres. And it wouldn't make sense for us to interchangeably put those genres into a compiled work without knowing that that was either a comic or a classified ad or a sports report or something like that. So we do the same thing with scripture by looking at what type of genre the original writer was using. So Pastor Charlie has been talking about the genre of Psalms, and he's been doing those midweek devotionals. So there's many different types of Psalms, and he's been explaining those. There's also, we have narrative history, like with Acts or some of the Old Testament. We have different types of poetry. We have epistles, like Paul, you know how Pastor Charlie talks about the letter or an epistle to a certain church, such as Ephesians. That is its own genre because the epistles had a way that they always wrote the same way that a classified ad or a sports report will always look the same in the newspaper. So we would expect certain things and certain content in each type of genre. So I'm going to start with Psalms as a genre because Psalms is something that Pastor Charlie is already going over. So whenever we look at the Psalms, there's many different types of Psalms, but in general, we can see that there's a lot of similarities with the way that they either make you feel or the imagery that they bring up. So the book for How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth, it brings up 3 specifics. So let me just read those where Psalms, in general, either provide a guide to worship, that would be like a psalm of ascent that the Levites would use, that would be a good example. They demonstrate how we can relate honestly to God, so like Pastor Charlie talks about the laments or different praises, we can relate honestly by using those psalms, or they demonstrate the importance of reflection and meditation for the things that God has done for us. So they're songs of remembrance and hymns of thanksgiving, things like that. And in general, we have several different types of psalms, and I'll just read through them. We have laments, thanksgiving, salvation history, celebration, hymns of praise, wisdom, and then songs of trust. And all of those are different types of musical works. They were all the psalms were usually accompanied by a musical background, and they were able to get people to understand something that the writer was trying to get across, or to be able to express some type of emotion for a certain event. So think about it. I'm recording this over Memorial Day weekend. During Memorial Day, we might sing songs like the Battle Hymn of the Republic or some type of patriotic song. It's emotional, and it gets you to remember, or it has actual recounting of something that happened in the past. The Star Spangled Banner is another one of those, where it's remembering a specific event in the eyes of the author. So in the same way, the Psalms can remember those types of emotional events. And one of the ways that the Psalms do it is the same way that Hebrew literature does in general, where it connects something that's from your heart and makes it so that your mind can wrap your head around it. So this weekend, when Pastor Charlie did his sermon, he talked about in Ephesians, where it talks about God, it's just beyond our comprehension, beyond the way that we can think. So that's why Paul used the words, the height and breadth and depth of the love of God. So you could see how the way that he said that was similar to poetry from a psalm. It's very metaphorical in some ways with Psalms, and it's very emotive into your heart. Now, just because it's emotive doesn't always mean it's positive, because it doesn't necessarily require us to have a pleasant life. It just means that God is with us. And a lot of David's Psalms express that. So let's go over a quick example of one of those ones where it's not always positive. With the third Psalm, Pastor Charlie actually went over this, I think, during his one Bible study. Listen to the words. This, you can tell it's a lament, because it says, Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. Well, that's starting out with a certain type of form where you can tell, okay, this is either going to turn into a thanksgiving or it's going to be a lament. And they're kind of similar, because all of the laments end up with a thing at the end where they talk about the assurance of God's love and a praise. And then thanksgiving will be a little bit more complex with that. Lament will go into some of those things where the author is despairing, but then he has to turn his eyes back toward God. And with the lament psalms, one of the principles of a psalm that we have to take into account anytime we're reading them is that we have to interpret it as a single literary unit. We can't pull out a stanza of the psalm because it's written in a certain format. So if you just read, many are saying of me, God will not deliver him, from Psalm 3, that's actually in the Bible, but the framework of the psalm always turns back into a praise at the end. So it says, from the Lord comes deliverance in verse 8. May your blessing be on your people. So if we remove the verse that talks about the primary lament from the praise at the end, then we're not looking at it in its general context. And each one of those psalms is supposed to be read as a single unit. So that's one of the first principles that we're going to use when we're looking at the Psalms. Now, what I want you to do is to go read all of Psalm 3, and that's the one with lament, and then I want you to read Psalm of 138, which will be a different type of psalm, and then see if you can tell me what the difference is. And then we'll look at that one next time, Psalm 138 and Psalm 3. All right, God bless you guys.